can't do anything.
Okay, we're live.
Good morning.
I'm hoping we have audio. Check and see.
Well,
He
let's
said-
check mics.
He said he'll be here in 2 minutes.
Oh, okay. Well, why don't we check
We have
mics?
like 3 minutes to go, right?
Yeah.
And then we'll,
Am I on screen or am I hiding in the
You're
corner
on.
over here? Okay.
You're on. Look at Jerry's on. You're on.
Yay.
Okay.
You know who the keynote is for the conference today? Doug Lip, the Disney guy.
Oh, really?
Yeah. I think it's gonna
What
be
conference is that?
SARA, Sacramento Area
Oh,
Human Resources.
okay.
The one I spoke at
Yeah.
yesterday.
Okay.
Yeah, I think it's gonna be the same spiel that we've already seen.
Yeah.
Because you've seen him, right? He's good. I mean, he's engaging.
Isn't he the one that spoke at the Galena?
Yeah.
Yeah.
The Disney University book guy.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think he's talking about employee engagement and retention and keeping people happy and probably the same stuff that we saw him talk about before.
Yeah. I'll be back.
Test, 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 test. Good. You're on.
Test. Hello. Can you hear me? Is it good?
You don't have your headphones on.
I know, but you're my ears today.
Oh.
Is it good? Should I test?
I can't hear anything in mine. Oh, there we go.
Is this good, Jerry? 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 Jerry?
Yeah.
Good? How about 3? Is this good? How's the sound on this one? Mr. John Cox.
4.
Is this one good? Can you hear number 4? 4's good? Excellent.
Oh, I didn't have the power on. That's why I couldn't hear.
That's why.
Let me try. Say something.
yeah, we can check them again.
Okay.
That's right. This is your seat?
No, it was just I didn't have my headphones turned on.
These
Good
are your
morning.
cans?
Katie.
That's your
Hi.
mic.
Wonderful.
So have you been on the show before? Is this the
Yeah.
station before?
I don't think I've been
No.
here.
Did you talk with Phil Cowan?
Yeah, I've talked to him on the
Okay,
phone.
so he's right down the hall.
Oh, awesome. Like to meet him.
Yeah, I spoke to
We good
Sean.
time?
We just mic checked, so we are good.
Oh, good.
Okay, how much? Do you want water?
Yeah, bottle water would be great. And are you on Facebook Live?
I am
We
right
are
there.
already on streaming.
Oh, I'm already on streaming.
Yeah.
Wonderful.
And then we'll put it on my YouTube channel later. So
Perfect.
I wanted to
Wonderful.
quickly run down kind of what your hot
So it's Katie and
Mark,
Mark.
what your hot issues are, and then I know we're talking specifically homelessness.
Yeah,
but
we're
we
going
can
to talk
sort of
about
pull
homelessness.
out,
I mean,
you know,
the
some
big
other-
issue in California is the corruption making the state unaffordable and making the business climate untenable for most businesses. And the main issue is the corruption in Sacramento and the control by the funders of campaigns, you know,
Yep.
and taking a business approach and solving problems, but that's not what they do. They do what they can to raise money.
Well,
Yeah.
water and no scotch.
no
No
Scotch.
scotch.
John, where in San Diego are you
Rancho Santa Fe.
from? Okay, I grew up in
Thanks.
San Diego.
Oh, wonderful! Yeah,
This is mic number 3 then, right?
Now my middle daughter's going to San Diego State. She's a
Check mic
freshman.
3.
So.
wonderful,
Yeah.
wonderful. I hope she has a state that's affordable. And the homelessness.
I hope so too.
You know, the homelessness is directly related to that. I mean, there's a lot of components to homelessness, and we'll talk about that. But
So we go intro segment, which is fairly short,
okay,
and then first segment, which is a pretty long chunk, second segment, third,
fourth.
and then a short exit phase out.
awesome.
And she'll get hand signals from Jerry for how many minutes are left. So when she flashes, that's like 4 minutes.
We're free for the full hour.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wonderful.
Although technically we started like 8:06, so it's really
Oh, good.
15.
Oh, so I had more time.
We have a full hour. Yeah. So that's where
I mean,
I
I
was
could have
saying.
gotten here later.
No. Because then we'd have to start without you.
I didn't
Uh,
want that. Believe me, my young driver knew I was not happy about it.
So are you in town
Oh,
for?
we're on, guys.
You're in town for
What?
a couple days? You're in town for a couple days, or?
Yeah. I'm speaking at a couple of events in East Bay.
Oh, good.
Yes, 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Hey, I'm a CPA. I need numbers.
As am I. I'm curious about your background.
Yeah, I am too.
Were you a practicing public accountant?
Yes. Oh yeah. And I'm
Tax
a lawyer
or
too.
audit?
I'm sorry.
Tax or audit?
Yeah. Well, tax mostly. But
Well,
I'm a
all right.
lawyer too, so I'm a CPA and attorney.
You have your own firm or?
Yeah. Oh yeah. I've had a firm for 40 years.
In Metro Santa Fe or
No,
what?
Chicago.
Oh, okay.
I'm from Chicago originally. I moved here 10 years ago.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. But
30 seconds.
we're going to go into that when you intro?
Yeah, we'll go into the background.
Oh, perfect.
And then
Awesome.
we'll talk about the issue, maybe one second segment, big issues.
Good.
You know, take some callers too if we have,
Yeah, we give out the numbers so people call in.
Let's
or
let's
also
get questions.
comments online. And
Yeah. So I'm watching the Facebook
all right,
feed as
we're
well.
going, guys. Volume's okay? Can you hear the show in your ears?
Yes.
Okay.
That's both John's face.
Good morning. Welcome to Beyond the Numbers on Money 105.5. Katie McConnell here.
Good morning, everybody. Mark Bellows, Katie's co-host today and every day.
Every day.
For at least another little while. Katie and I both work at Clifton Larson Allen, a national CPA firm with an office here in the Sacramento area. I'm on the tax side, a principal, and I work with manufacturing distribution, real estate, and construction type businesses and their owners. And Katie is a CPA, but also our hiring
guru.
person. Yes.
I was speaking at the Sacramento Area Human Resources Conference yesterday, actually, about strategic recruitment and hiring.
Is that right?
So
And
that's
what was
interesting.
what was the main thrust of your speech? What were you?
Strategic recruitment and hiring.
What does that mean, Katie?
So talking about the strategy behind how we hire and consciously making good evaluations on hiring people, asking the right interview questions, planning for the future with regard to your hiring pipeline.
Well, and you've talked about it before. It's the key with an employee is upfront hiring. I mean, after you've hired them, you're not going to change who they are, and so getting the right fit is important up front versus down the line.
Absolutely. We had a very good dialogue.
Okay, was it at a panel?
It was. Yep.
Nice.
So
Nice.
had VSP as well
Okay.
and Dignity Health as
Excellent.
my fellow panelists. So it's
Excellent.
a strong panel.
Yeah, good.
Yeah, so with us this morning we have an extra special guest today, Republican governor candidate John Cox. Good morning.
Good morning, Katie.
Good morning, John.
Good morning, Mark. It's nice to be among CPAs.
Yeah.
Exactly.
A like-minded group
Although I
here.
understand your background is in tax, so I won't hold that against you.
Well, obviously he's a
an
much
audit
much
background.
more intelligent
Well,
person.
I did a few audits, but I really like tax a lot more.
Well, I did a few tax returns, and hopefully we're past the statute of limitations on those bad boys.
Hopefully, it's probably been a couple of years.
Yeah.
You're probably safe on those.
They're probably past, what is it, 7 years?
Yeah. So you're not only a CPA, but also an attorney?
Yeah, I went to law school at night while I worked as a CPA at Coopers and Library.
Oh, okay.
Remember that firm? And it's now
Aren't
Price.
you?
I was at Price Waterhouse when we merged with Cooper's.
Yeah,
Many years ago.
I was in the Chicago office
Okay.
at Price Waterhouse Coopers. So,
Okay.
yeah.
Yeah. Nice.
So-
So we're compadres. We worked
Yeah,
together.
teammates, yeah.
At some point in time.
Long ago.
Yeah.
Tell us a little bit about your story and your background and how you kind of came to decide you wanted to run for governor of California.
Well, my story begins on the south side of Chicago, believe it or not. I always tell people I grew up in Barack Obama's district while he was up growing up surfing in Hawaii. I didn't exactly surf Lake Michigan, though. But my mom was a Chicago public school teacher in the south side of Chicago. Single mom raising 4 kids. And that's really why I got involved in politics, as I saw the corruption in the Chicago public schools firsthand. Up close and personal. My mom had battles with the principals who were mostly friends of the alderman, and that really is political corruption writ large. You know, people think of corruption as just a alderman getting an envelope of cash or something, but it's way more than that, because we got political leadership in this country, especially, but in Chicago then, and frankly in California right now, that makes decisions based upon how it suits them politically and not because it's the best thing to do for their constituents.
Yeah, the voters, yeah.
Yeah, and that really has formed my life. You know, I'm a businessman. I mean, I've started 5 businesses. I've turned around companies. You know, I've done a lot in 40 years. God, I can't believe it's that long. But all the way along, I looked at the political leadership that we get, and I wanted to change it because we just don't get the best and the brightest, I'm sorry, in politics. You know, a lot of them, it's the best job they've ever had. And, you know, the trouble is, especially in states like Illinois and California, it's all about fundraising. It's all about making sure you gather enough money from special interests to fund a campaign and run a bunch of TV ads and send a bunch of mail out. And then you go into the state capitol and you just take marching orders. And usually that results in legislation that really doesn't suit the constituents. It results, you know, bigger government, because that's what special interests want usually. More regulations. We deal with that. That's probably why you don't like tax, Katie.
Among other reasons.
Among other reasons. And then the spending and the debt levels. You know, California is essentially bankrupt. We're CPAs. We can talk. We're just among us, right? We're not. This isn't getting out of this room.
Oh,
is
don't
it?
worry,
it's just-
yes.
Okay.
We're not streaming on the internet or anything.
We're not streaming on the internet. We're not.
Yeah,
We're not
there
getting
you
out
go.
of this room, you know, because Jerry wouldn't like it if the secret got out.
Troglodyte, isn't that the word he used the other day?
Yeah, well, that's a big word.
Yeah, dude.
What he ought to be using is bankruptcy. What he ought to be using is occupying the jail cell next to Bernie Madoff, because the state is running a Ponzi scheme, you understand, the state of California. It's making all kinds of promises to state workers that it knows it can't meet. They're assuming they're going to earn humongous amounts of money on their investments, which they haven't been. And they also assume, by the way, that state workers are going to die young. And of course, many of them refuse to die.
Well, it's kind of like the housing.
They got
crash.
good health care.
It's kind of like the housing.
Exactly, they got great health care. They don't want to die. Listen, I don't want to die either. I want to stay
I
around.
can see an analogy with the housing crisis where people kept buying high, thinking, oh, but the price will go up, the price will go up.
Sure.
Down the line, the price will go up and I'll be okay. And it's like they keep thinking, oh yeah, more and more people put money in this plan and they'll fund it and it'll never, the gravy train will never end. And I don't know
Hope,
that that's
hope is not a strategy, is it, Mark?
Well, especially with people getting, the population getting smaller, right? I mean, there are less people being born now than there was, so, right? Am I right on that?
Well,
Well, I don't know.
Well,
it's
millennials,
true.
millennials a smaller generation than Gen X is. I mean, I just think,
Sure.
yeah. So that's the problem, is that it's not going to replenish itself.
by the way, I'm partly responsible for that. I have 4 unmarried daughters, so I don't have any grandkids yet. I'm giving up hope, but that's what's happening in this generation. They're putting off getting married. They're putting off having children, and you're right, Mark. If we didn't have immigration, we wouldn't have a growing population at all. Now, the trouble is that our immigration system is broken because we're importing people who are dependent and not actually producing in many situations. So that's an issue.
Yeah.
We can talk about that one. But
We've got a lot of good juice, I think, that
We
we're
do. This is a good
talking
start.
about. We're talking
Oh, yeah.
with the Republican governor for California candidate John Cox. I wanted to throw out the number for the show here if you have a question for John or if he strikes a chord. 866-576-1055 is our number. Once again, 866-576-1055.
We're also on Facebook Live. People can put comments in there, and if they're on there, we will respond to them.
Text in comments. So
Yes.
I'm curious because we've talked so much about all the problems, and I think nobody's arguing that California is without problems. So when we get back from the break, I'd love to hear the solutions for all these problems.
that's a good thing, because that's what business people do. We find solutions.
Yes.
Absolutely, that's a great point. So, any other teasers before we go to commercial of any burning question, Mark, that you have for John?
No, I just kind of follow up on one of the things you said is we talked about legislatures, and then I think California's got a full-time, and there's lots of states that have part-time. I think that's a different.
Yeah,
Well,
but we'll talk about that.
Talk about it. We'll
Yeah.
be right back on Money 105.5.
Your person is possibly here.
He might be.
Oh, check and see. We have 2 minutes.
Good.
Matt said that there was going to be a staffer with you.
A what?
A staffer?
Yeah, he dropped me off.
Oh.
He literally didn't even stop the car.
Oh.
He just pushed me out of the car and while I was moving and I ran upstairs.
Is he coming on the radio also?
No.
Oh, okay.
No, it's just a driver.
I didn't know what that meant. A
No,
staffer.
I handle
It's
this.
it's what they say in the biz.
I handle this pretty much by myself. Are you a native California?
I am. I'm from Northern California, up in the mountains.
Up in the mountains. Jefferson.
Quincy. Yeah, exactly. Potentially.
Not sure that's going to happen, but
No.
there's other ways to fix the state. And let's talk about that, because
Yeah.
that's what solutions are all about. I mean, if I have a problem in my business, by the way, my main business now is real estate. I don't do tax returns anymore. You'd be happy to know. But I started buying apartment buildings when I was about your age, probably. Not your age, you're a little bit older.
I'm a little bit older than Katie, yeah, for sure.
Well, 28. I bought my
Oh, well,
first
thank you,
building.
but I'm a little bit older than that too.
Oh, all right. And I now have several thousand in Indiana, Illinois, and Wisconsin.
Oh, good.
Which what happens when you start when you're 28 and you're now 62.
Yeah.
I guess I'm
Build
behind.
it up.
I
You
guess
better start buying some.
I just sold both my properties, so I'm
I've never sold one.
really. Well, I had
refinancing them.
I had a rental condo, and then I had a house in downtown Sacramento.
Oh.
Well, I have a house out in Lincoln, so I still have a property, but
Yeah.
I live in that one.
I buy larger, I mean like 100 units at a time.
So Indiana, Illinois,
Wisconsin.
Wisconsin. Okay.
I love Wisconsin. So
Oh, it's
beautiful there.
great. Well-managed state. Indiana's well-managed. Illinois.
You never see
not so much.
garbage all over the road in Wisconsin.
Is that right?
It's just clean. It's green. I mean, our city is ugly.
Oh,
It's yellow and ugly. There's trash everywhere.
Well, we don't have any water right now. That's an issue. Rain, so that's part of the burnout.
And we're back. Money 105.5. Mark and Katie here, joined by our guest today, John Cox, governor candidate for California, representing the Republican Party.
Thank you, John, again for being on the show. Pleasure to have you on.
Thank you
right
for
before the
having me.
break, we were talking about part-time legislatures and whether that would help any. Can a state like California go to a part-time legislature? Would that make sense?
Well, it actually had one a long time ago, but I think, Mark, the real issue is not how much time they put in,
Right.
but what their motivations are.
Yeah.
When you really get down to it, we're all business people, so what we do in our businesses is we try to create systems that motivate people in the right direction. So if we want more sales, if we want to cut expenses, if we want to move into a new market, we try to design systems that motivate and incent people to go in the right direction, right?
Sure.
Right?
Oh, yeah.
Isn't that what we do? And you do that when you hire two people as well.
Absolutely.
The trouble in California are the incentives, because the districts are so humongous, the legislative districts, 1 million people in a state senate district in California. Think about that for a second. 1 million.
How could you know your people? How could you canvass the neighborhoods? I mean, there's just not enough time to do that.
Well, not only that, you have to then reach some of those people, right, to get them to vote for you. You gotta get your name out. You gotta get your issues out, whatever they might be, to get people to motivate to go to the polls and vote for you, right? And that takes money. So the incentive in California is to raise money, because if you don't, you get nowhere.
Right.
And of course, who is out there to give you that money? It's all kinds of people who want something from government, right? I mean, they want a regulation to squash a competitor. They want a program to give credits or some kind of government benefit to people so they can buy your service. They might be trial lawyers who want to make sure that they have a willing and able court system that's going to award them all kinds of fees. They might be an environmental group that raises money saying that we're going to lose our wonderful natural resources, and then
What fraud was it in Davis that they built the tunnel under the freeway
Oh,
because of the fraud?
right. Yeah. Well, I see that where I come from all the time
Yeah.
too. There's a lot of protected land up there.
Yes.
absolutely, and of course those groups raise money, and then they have to do something with that money, right? Because they take a little cut of it to pay their own salaries, right?
Of course.
And then they give it to politicians who pass some law, and then they can go back to those people who gave them money and say, hey, look, I got something done for you. Give me more. And they make a little bit more. And that's their business model. The trouble for the rest of the taxpayers in California is that this business model doesn't work for us. It works for the fundraisers. It works for the advertising companies. It works for the politicians who stay in office. But for the rest of us, we have to deal with traffic. We have to deal with home prices that are going out of sight. We have to deal with water and electricity bills that choke a horse. We have to deal with all the ills of our failures in state government, and it's directly back related to this fundraising. And so you mentioned, Katie, let's try to find a solution.
Right.
And that's what I'm all about, because
and one of your solutions, I read on your website, was shrinking the size of those districts.
yes,
right?
I'm sponsoring a ballot initiative. At the same time, I'm a businessman running for governor to turn around the state and get that leadership going. I'm also trying to change the structure of our political system. Just a little bit, though. It's a real, it's a tweak in the system, but it's a real important tweak, because what it does is it takes the incentive to raise money out of the picture. Because
Sure.
if we make these districts incredibly tiny, you don't need money. And I'm talking like a couple thousand voters in a district, a neighborhood, for example.
Yeah.
And how will you get elected? You'll go door to door, and you'll knock on the doors of your neighbors, many of whom you'll probably already know because you're involved in your neighborhood already probably, and you'll ask them for their vote. Now, the trouble in a state like California is it's humongous, right? We've got 40 million people, so you're going to end up creating thousands of districts. So what we devised was a kind of a revolutionary idea, and it's these thousands of legislators send a working committee to Sacramento, a small number. So you're still dealing with a relatively small number of people here in Sacramento, 120. But they're accountable to these people out there in the neighborhoods.
Right.
And that's the accountability is a very, very important element to this.
I understand how that addresses the money trail.
Yeah.
California has so much going on. I don't want to say to unwind, but we've got covered California. Our healthcare system is a little amok, if you will, especially in Sacramento, where we have the 3 big dog hospital conglomerates. We've got homelessness as an issue, which Mark and I were talking off air. Being from San Diego, it's everywhere.
Everywhere.
Mark, you just saw it.
Yeah, when we took my daughter to orientation at San Diego State, and
Sure.
Ubered back to the airport, came down 8, and then 163 and 5, and it's just amazing how many are along that route. How many blue canvases and blue tarps, and it's just
Not to defend San Diego so much, but it's also there in Los Angeles. It's in
Oakland,
it's all over
San
the
Francisco,
state.
Sacramento, Rockland.
Well, I
we've got
think
it in
here
Rockland.
particularly,
So it's everywhere.
Governor Steinberg is, hitting on that right now.
Mayor.
Mayor Steinberg.
Yeah.
Let's not elevate him.
I've promoted him.
Let's not promote him.
He's talking about it
He's
a
a
lot.
good fundraiser.
With all of the urban development going on in Sacramento, some of the areas where they used to live, like this new development over by the McKinley Village or whatever they're calling it, by the railroad tracks, they used to hub there. Well, now they're being pushed out, and we're seeing them up by our office in Roseville. We're seeing them in the suburbs. They've kind of just spread out everywhere. And I think the solution in Sacramento has been, well, let's put up these pods so that they have housing.
Yeah, that's part of it.
And you and I shared with you my view that putting somebody in that situation in a box on the street does not fix homelessness. It just takes a homeless person and puts them in a pod on the street.
Well, homelessness is a huge problem, and we just talked about where it is in the cities. But you got to break it down to a lot of elements, I believe. Okay, first of all, there's a lot of those people out in the streets are mentally ill.
That's weird.
Yeah, and we've shut down the mental hospitals, and we thought that was a good thing, and all it did was turn people out in the streets. So so that's one issue. Another one has to be drug abuse. I mean, we obviously know that opioids, especially prescription opioids, are now an epidemic in this country. Huge problem. And I think it's the expansion of the welfare state with regard to prescription drugs. I mean, the doctors unfortunately are participating in this to some extent, and they're oversubscribing, and we're losing control of the prescription opioids, which certainly help you if you just had surgery. and you need to get over some temporary pain and discomfort, but obviously those are getting out in the general population and really causing
Yeah,
some
and I
problems.
just real quick, I've seen
Yeah.
some other state, and I don't remember where it is, but I believe somewhere, maybe one of the T's, but they're starting to do some limitation on how much could be prescribed and more oversight on that. And again, you don't want to get government into it, but somehow
It's
something
all
needs to be done.
connected. That goes back to the money trail, incentive, and accountability.
And I don't see if
It
California
is all
gonna do
connected,
like
Katie.
that yet.
You're absolutely right, because what we also have is the illegal drugs. I mentioned the opioids, but it's also heroin, cocaine, which has gotten incredibly cheap. There was a segment on one of the news shows over the weekend that talked about heroin packets as cheap as, I don't know, $10 or something like this. So and that's all a function of a border, which is not enforced, because you've got tremendous amounts of drugs coming from, southern countries, the southern hemisphere, where frankly the governments are very corrupt and are almost owned by the drug trade, right? We obviously don't have this problem with Canada, where we have a 3,000-mile unprotected border. We have it to the south, obviously, and we have to deal with that. And then the third aspect, I think, which is really, really important here, is the cost of housing. And that's driving, and that's in many ways the saddest, although all three are sad. But the fact that there are families that actually work, that have jobs, that aren't mentally ill and aren't drug addled,
Can't afford.
but they can't afford it.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting. I believe there are, I don't know how many of the population of that, but I think there are working families, or ones maybe where the husband has lost the job but the wife still works, or vice versa. But they can't afford to rent a place, so they're in their car. Or
They make money.
Yeah.
They make some amount of money, but the average rent down in San Diego now is $2,500 a month or something like this for a one bedroom or something. I mean, it's almost gotten ridiculous.
I think that's gotten ridiculous.
Yeah, I would say that's ridiculous.
Yeah.
Well, just to give you an idea, I'm in the apartment business
Yeah.
myself, and the apartments I have are in Indiana, Illinois, and Wisconsin, and our average rents are probably $800 to $1,000 for
Right.
1,000 square feet. You're talking triple the price in San Francisco, Central Coast, San Diego, and so you could have a actually decent job, but be a working person. And you're basically homeless because you're part of the working poor. You can't really afford it. And by the way, it's not just the price of the house or the apartment, it's also the price of gasoline, which they just enacted a gas tax that raised the price of that, as well as the cap and trade to fund the crazy train, which is also going to drive up the cost of gasoline. So if you have to actually get in a car and drive to work, you're paying more for that. Water costs, electricity.
You mentioned electricity and water. PG&E just keeps going up.
Oh,
and
I
up
know
and
it.
up and up. It's
Yeah.
crazy. That's what we have. We're full PG&E in my house, and it's just insane how much that goes up.
Well, and we have to really talk about how the rest of us are working for the public sector workers. And listen, I'm not trying to bash public sector workers. Obviously, they need to live as well as anybody else. But you got to go to a website called transparentcalifornia.com and just take a gander, take a look at some of the salaries that are being paid by the water boards, by the hospitals, by the prison system. The prison system, the salaries are just off the charts. 400, 500. I saw one dentist in the system, $700,000 for a dentist that works in the prison system. And if people out there don't believe that these costs don't end up in the price of everything that they're buying, their water, their electricity, their gasoline, their home, their food, everything, it's there.
It is.
And it's all corrupt.
We're talking with the Republican governor candidate for California, John Cox. If you have a question for John, you want to chime in, 866-576-1055 is our number.
And what is your website if people want to learn more about what John Cox is about and what he's...
Well, let's have people go to two websites. First of all, for the governor's race, they can find out about me at johncoxforgovernor.com.
Okay.
And
number 4 or the word 4?
The word for, F-O-R.
Okay.
So johncoxforgovernor.com and then neighborhoodlegislature.com.
Okay.
Perfect. We'll be right back with John Cox. Oh, your stuff, your guys here.
Okay. Well, this is a quite a climb to do this and get this word out on the state. So appreciate your.
Absolutely. Well, Matt, actually, you can thank him.
Yeah. Did he know you from somewhere else, or did you?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Well, we know each other for a couple years now, I think.
Oh, okay. Good.
Actually, yeah.
Okay.
So I think he saw the show. We were arguing immigration. I had a couple guests, and we actually a lawyer. And he saw it and said, "Wait a minute, I have an
Get my
idea."
candidate on here.
Yeah. I want to talk, and tell me if this is too much of a detour, but I was going to ask before the break about this sort of stigma and lack of education that Republicans are only for rich people, and therefore this Democratic segment in Sacramento, we're all just going to vote for one of the Democratic candidates because you're going to take away. I don't want to say handouts on the radio, but.
Well,
do you want to?
I'll just speak to that because
Okay.
because I'm a small businessman. I think the Republican Party is the party of opportunity and small business, frankly, and that's where I come from, not from the government dependency. People want you to be dependent so they can count on your support. How do you think dictators keep their power?
Right. Yeah.
How do you think Kim Jong-un keeps power in North Korea? He makes sure the generals makes money. So it's all about power feeding each other. I'm for independence, for the ability to make it on your own. I firmly believe most Californians agree with that approach, and that's why I think I have a very good chance to be elected.
I think you're right.
I don't know that they do. I feel like we've got a lot of lazy people that are used to getting a lot of handouts in the state.
There's some number, Katie, but I don't think it's a majority. I think the majority of people in this state really do, feel like they want to make it on their own. But I can be wrong.
He said hope wasn't a strategy.
Well, you're right.
In and of itself, well, it's going to be backed up by action.
I'm
some
such
type
a
of
cynic.
plan.
I think I'm just such a cynic.
Well, it's hard because it seems like the Democrats win every race, and that's why everybody calls us a blue state. But it's because they actually target the people who will vote for them, and they make sure they vote, and the rest of the people turn off.
Yeah.
And we can talk about that because I think the neighborhood legislature, one of the nice things about it is it might rekindle some people that get involved in the political system.
That'd be good.
One of the things I think
We can discuss. Yeah.
Wisconsin and other states do right that we really botched is we have so many programs. It's like super confusing. We have a program for kids who want to eat vegetables. We got a program for we got this, we got that, and then every single one of these guys has a budget. And so trying to figure out how to
and
allocate
16 people, 16 analysts monitoring the budget.
Right,
Yeah.
but then it's like, if you really
Right.
need help, where in the hell do you even go if you want to find out about these programs because they're so convoluted?
Let's talk about the incentives of it.
Cut them, just get rid of all of them and start over with a really simple one system. Oh, this is my commercial.
Well, the joke about cow turns, right? Which is, you got one guy that works and 3 that supervise, and I think
And
it's
someone
like
to watch
that.
the supervisor. it's
and someone else to mark it down.
Exactly.
And it seems like so many. Of
Any
the-
business survive doing that?
No, we don't have that.
Because we have competition.
Yeah.
We can't pass along that cost
Exactly.
because we have competition.
Yeah.
What competition is there for the government?
That's none.
There's none.
I know.
And there's no one demanding that the government get lean. As a matter of fact, the incentives are in totally the opposite direction.
Yeah.
Opposite direction.
Overcoming that is the big, huge challenge.
Yeah.
That's why I'm doing this.
There we go.
Excuse me.
Big bucks.
You're waiting for the second.
That's what
Jerry.
we're talking
Oh.
about. Waiting for the producer to cue me in there.
Yes,
On the
yes.
wings of big bucks.
Yes, we're talking with John Cox, the Republican candidate for governor of California. The election is in about a year.
Yeah.
So, how long ago did you declare your candidacy?
March, early March, and I've been out traveling around the state. Been out raising money. We've actually got almost 2,500 contributors already.
Excellent.
Several $100,000, even though I'm not really that well known yet. And I think that's going to change. We're going to get some people involved in this campaign because they'll see that there's a chance to get some changes.
It's a long process, isn't it? The campaigning.
It really is. But I like people. I guess that's
There's another rumor about CPAs we can overturn on the show today.
That's right.
Let's do
CPAs
that.
like
We
people.
like people. We enjoy working with people.
I enjoy working with
And
people.
helping people out. Sorry to cut you off.
No, exactly right, Mark, because we get hired by businesses oftentimes to solve problems, to design systems and get a better result for a business, right? And when we do that and we achieve it, whether it's reducing their taxes, or or helping them hire somebody,
Sure.
Right hire.
yeah, and designing systems. And we were talking during the break a little bit about how the incentives in California are kind of skewed by the way the legislature is structured. Think about this for a second. In private business, you want to have the fewest number of people you can have to get your job done, because you don't want to inflate your costs, because that has to be passed through to the customers, and you're in competition with all the other providers out there. So if you have a restaurant, you can't afford to pay all your waiters hundreds of thousands of dollars,
No.
and you can't afford to have extra waiters that just sit around doing nothing, because that would end up in the cost of your food, and
Of course,
you go in there, you can't sell a steak for $500, right?
And on top of that, you're concerned about quality, because in an open market, you can get a bad Yelp
Right.
review and it'll put you under.
Yeah.
But think about government. In Caltrans, which is one of the worst and most corrupt agencies on the face of the earth, you've got people who are sitting around supervising the supervisors who supervise the supervisors, and then there's somebody watching the supervisors doing the... The point is, the incentive at Caltrans is to beef up employment. And why? Because the more people that work there, they're members of the union, which means they pay dues.
Of course.
And they pay dues on a per capita basis, so which means if you have 500 people, you get 500 times $1,000 or $600 or whatever it is annually. And if you have 1,000 people paying dues, that's even better, because you get dues from 1,000 people. So the incentive is to have more people working. And because government doesn't have competition, I mean, if you don't like what Caltrans is doing, can you get a different agency?
Can
Yeah.
you write a Yelp review?
Yeah.
Can you write a Yelp review? Does that help? No. and of course, you can say, well, I'm going to get rid of my assemblyman or my senator. Well, good luck on that one, because your senator or your assemblyman is probably funded by those same unions to a tune of millions of dollars, and tons of people helping them out to get elected. So your chances of getting them to be accountable are very slim. This is all what we have to change in California, and it's what the neighborhood legislature is all about. It's what my campaign for governor is all about. I think this effort has the potential to bring people back into the political process. I think there's so many people out there, I think you'd agree, your friends, maybe among them my friends are, they basically say, why do I get involved in politics? Why do you even do this, John? You can't make a difference. You can't change it. The people who fund the campaigns are going to still be in power. And my answer is, we have to try.
Yep.
And I really believe that people of this state have had enough, that they are looking at all the problems in the state and they're saying, what can we do? I believe they will see in my candidacy for governor, as well as the neighborhood legislature, a structure and a change that will really make a difference. And I think November of 2018, people will vote for that.
How engaged is the population of California in terms of voting? Do we know? Is it
It's really interesting. I've been trying to talk to working people throughout this whole campaign.
Right.
It might be the train conductor on the Amtrak when I go up to Los Angeles, because I hate driving in Los Angeles. It might be the Uber drivers that drive me around in Los Angeles after I get off the train.
Yeah.
And I asked them, how do they feel about what's going on in California? And every single one of them tells me, you know what? I'm part of the working poor. I'm working 2 jobs. It's tougher and tougher to make the rent payment. I got water bills that keep going up, the electricity, the food. All of these costs keep escalating and escalating. I love living here, but I got to tell you, I might have to leave. And there's an article in the paper today about something like 60% of Californians have considered leaving
Yeah, I saw that.
because
Yeah, but do they? Because they're coming here in troves.
Well, that's the thing, and I, my cynical nature, if you will, like yours, is I think our legislature knows that, and so there's no impetus for them to change because California is not presently losing. All right, it's got a net job increase, a net population increase. So again,
Well, and I think also if you look at the population of employment in Sacramento, a big chunk of our population is employed by those three big hospital systems with exorbitant salaries and the government. So why would they vote for somebody that is telling me, I'm going to take it away from you?
I'm not going to get a lot of votes from the public sector employees, probably not, no. But
And you know what? They all get time off to work to vote, and maybe the entrepreneur gets a call and doesn't make it, and hopefully he's got an absentee ballot on his desk.
yeah,
I mean, I hate to say it, but that's the reality of it.
I take comfort, Katie, though, in the fact that the public sector workforce is only about 10% of the total workforce in California,
Really.
which means that
That's
nine.
less than I
on
was
one
thinking.
hand, that's less. On the other hand, the word "only" is.
That's true. It's a little a
only
large.
10% of our population is employed by the government.
It's a large number,
It's
Mark.
a very large number.
And I assure you, it will go down in my governorship. Okay, but it's still 10%, which means there's 90% out there who are working to support that 10%.
And most of the 90% is small business.
And that's the point, by the way, Mark. I'm glad you mentioned that because I'm a small businessman. Republicans have gotten this reputation. Of course, who gives them that reputation is the media and the Democrats, for the most part, who want to demonize Republicans as the party of the fat cats and the party of the big businesses. And frankly, our party has done that a little bit to themselves as well. I would be the first to say that.
A few missteps here and there.
But I'm a small businessman. I'm an entrepreneur. I was on Jack Kemp's presidential steering committee when he ran for president back in '87, a long time ago, before you were born, Katie. Sure.
Sure thing.
And clearly, I believe that Republicans stand for small business. Republicans stand for entrepreneurship. Republicans stand for opportunity. I don't believe that most people want to sit at home and get a government check. I really don't. And I know, Katie, you might think that there's a large number of those, but I really...
I don't want to think that, though. Back to your hope strategy.
But I really believe, think about the history of our country. People came from all over the world to come to, and they still come from all over the world, by the way, legally, from Eastern Europe, from Africa, from South America. I was in Argentina. I saw the line around the U.S. Embassy there of people waiting to get a visa to come to the United States.
We're definitely still the land of opportunity.
We are. And they fled in most situations, and maybe even almost all situations, they left their home country in order to leave corruption behind, right?
Yep.
Then they come here, and then they discover that we still have corruption here.
It's institutionalized.
Well, that's
in a
like
different
leaving
way.
one job to go to another job.
Yeah, and then you find out the grass is
everybody has
greener.
problems.
And,
Yeah, and nobody's going to sit here across the table from me and tell me that they're going to solve all the problems. I mean, I assume you're not either, right?
Well,
You
no, but I'm going to work to create a system like I do in business, a system and a structure that can actually address the problems. Maybe we won't solve all of them,
but at least address it.
Sure.
we'll address them, and we'll correct a whole lot of them.
Start the dialogue, get things moving along.
If we get the funders out of power, see, that's the big impediment. Frankly, it's the big impediment in Congress right now too.
Well, I was going to say it's a U.S. issue too. It's not just California.
It really is.
If we can start solving it here and be the leader, wouldn't that be fantastic? And the rest of the country could follow.
Our founders of this country, 240 years ago, came up with an idea for participatory government where citizens would get involved. In the last 50 or 100 years, it's evolved into this career politician, money-driven thing, and part of that is the populations. But I believe we can get it back to that, and that's what the neighborhood legislature is all about. It's all about getting people who don't make politics their business, but make it a public service and a leadership position.
We have to go to break. We will be right back with John Cox on Money 105.5 Beyond the Numbers.
Great.
Someone
No
on
calls.
Facebook asked about sanctuary cities. Do you want to talk about that?
Yeah, happy to.
When we get back, I'll
Yeah.
begin with the question, and then you can read the question.
Okay, this. Or we don't if we've got plenty. The question was basically what's his position on sanctuary cities. So
Yeah,
whether
no,
or not-
let's take a question.
Okay.
Yeah.
Was that the only question that came in?
Someone else said no single payer insurance,
Oh, please.
and then also cut Medicaid to people that should be working. So those are the comments.
Let's address them.
We have
But Medicaid's a fed.
15
Medi-Cal.
more minutes.
Medi-Cal.
Medi-Cal.
Yeah, but that's just in our name. It's $106 billion out of $180 billion budget. Think about that.
Medi-Cal is?
Yes. There's a whole industry that makes a ton of money off of Medi-Cal.
Yes. Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
that's what's at stake.
Well, that's the thing with prescription drugs too. They're incentivized to, write you a prescription rather than fix the root of the problem. We had a homeopathic doctor on a couple weeks ago, and we were talking about that.
Yeah. Sure.
And believe it or not, it was one of our biggest viewerships ever, which tells me that there's a lot of people that resonates with.
Yeah.
There's-
Absolutely.
Oh. And it's all about the incentives again. And how do these incentives happen? Is because the people who want the incentives to be that way fund the campaigns.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
I don't know if you remember this. A year ago, I sponsored an initiative to make all the legislators wear the logos of car drivers.
It's like a bit NASCAR driver. Yeah.
That was me.
It's funny.
Yeah,
That'd be great though.
that one lit up the internet. But if you think about it, that's our system.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
It's
from
our
the
system.
top down. I mean, unfortunately, the bottom up. I mean, it's that way in Washington. It's that way. In California.
It's all about sponsorship.
Where I think where you get away from that a lot, maybe not fully, but is in the local stuff.
Yes.
So the local school boards and the local
City
that have
councils.
city councils, yeah. And at least you can get away from some of the money, although.
And most of them, are Republicans. Most city councils and local officials.
And we're back. Mark and Katie here, joined by John Cox, governor candidate for California.
Yeah, and if you want to go to John's website, you've got two of them.
Yep.
It said John Cox for Governor, FOR, for Governor.
Yep.
And then .com. And then what was the other one?
Neighborhood Legislature,
Neighborhood
which is the ballot initiative. It has 650,000 signatures already. We're going to probably submit it in late October with well over 800,000 signatures.
Is that a .com, a .net? What's that?
That's a .com. Neighborhoodlegislature.com.
And that's the idea of that one is, as we've been discussing today, is to try to shrink the size of some of the populace that is represented, so get more of a representative.
And you get rid of fundraising.
Get rid of fundraising.
If the districts
Get rid of fundraising.
if the districts
Yeah.
are tiny, you don't need money. They can spend. People can try to spend money in a little tiny district, but you can counter it. You can compete with it by going door to door. You see this competition.
Yeah.
And you and I, we've talked, all of us have talked about competition is what makes businesses more quality and more cost efficient.
Yeah.
We had a question from a listener.
Yes.
Yeah.
One question was about your position on sanctuary, making California a sanctuary state.
This is quintessential fundraising. And why? Because there's two ways to get a check or to get money out of groups or people. Make them scared, make them angry. And frankly, sanctuary, this whole sanctuary state nonsense is all about making one group scared and another group angry. Because one group is angry because you're not enforcing the law. And that's the group I'm mostly identified with. I want to enforce law. Why do I want to enforce law? Because if you don't enforce law, you have chaos. That's first and foremost. You have anarchy. You got to have the rule of law. But the other side is scared because they're scaring people by thinking that there's going to be some deportation force that's going to come in their homes and yank them out and send them somewhere else. We got to fix the broken immigration system. We discussed the fact that our kids aren't having enough kids, so we have to have a growing population, but we should be immigrating people to this country who want to be Americans, want to work, want to produce and contribute to the country. And that often doesn't happen. We also have this porous border, which is letting criminals and gangs and drugs run free. And that's the other part that I think the president's going to address, and I support him fully on that.
I akin it to hiring. would you hire within your company for a bunch of people that don't want to work that hard so that you can work harder to pay their paycheck?
Right.
No, we want to recruit top talent that supports the mission and vision of the company.
And
So
Katie,
why don't we do that with our country?
we should, and we have an immigration system that chokes off immigration from people who really can contribute and want to do it. I mentioned I was in Argentina in March visiting some friends, and I drove by the American Embassy there and saw a line all the way around the building of people waiting to get into the country. Meanwhile, our border is allowing all kinds of people, and I feel sorry for people who live in Honduras and Guatemala and Mexico and some of these countries that have incredibly corrupt governments. I can't imagine what it's like living there, but we're not doing them any favors in many ways by uncontrolled immigration, because that means those governments don't get reformed. Those governments can keep on going their merry way and abusing their people. I think those governments ought to be reformed, but I think when we provide a safety valve for that, it hurts us and them.
We've got a couple minutes left, so let's make sure we've covered what's important to you, John. So you mentioned the neighborhood legislature.
Yeah.
And obviously trying to get the money out of politics, which is big. What else?
Well, let's pierce this
Yeah, that's what I'm
bubble
talking about.
or this myth that California is this blue state that's unconquerable by a Republican. I believe I can win this race. I believe I have a very good chance of winning the primary here, especially if we can consolidate Republicans down to one strong candidate, which I intend to be.
We're talking about it because the primary is the top two vote getters.
It is.
Right?
It is. And the Republican vote usually is around 30-35%. And so if I can appeal and get those, and just imagine in this state what would be the case if we could rally people around the idea of this positive change of getting money out of our state legislature. I think independents, I think a lot of Democrats are going to grab onto this idea as something that really could make a difference to move California forward. This stranglehold that the funders have on our state government, I think, is felt on all sides of the partisan divide. What I'd like to have people remember me about is a positive message that we can really get a hold of our government back into our control and take it away from these funders. We can make so many changes in transportation, in water storage, build some reservoirs and approach our water problems with a common sense approach. Electricity and utility generation should be done, in a common sense approach and not benefiting, cronies who give money out. I mean, I don't know if you know this, we've been paying Arizona money to take our excess electricity because we've subsidized all these solar farms and we're producing excess electricity. These are things that really hurt the future of California, and I love this state. I think this state has so many things going for it in terms of its weather and its natural beauty and the people, and it's being held back by a government that's really been captured by these special interests. I think people are going to, look at this campaign as a way of really making that change that we need to bring California into the future. That's the message.
What do you think, Mark?
Well, I think
Are you sold?
Yeah, I think it's a strong, powerful message, and the thing is to get it out to people, right?
Exactly.
I think what resonates with me as a business leader is, we're always trying new ideas in my practice, and we say, well, let's try it. And if it doesn't work and it bombs out, then hey, at least we tried it.
Right.
But we're not afraid of embracing something different. Yeah. And with California, we're such a big machine. We've been going in one direction for such a long time. Maybe people will say, well, let's try it. And if it bombs out, then he's out in 4 years, and we'll worry about something else. We'll try again.
Well, I think people look at the fact that Mr. Newsom, is pretty far to the left on the political spectrum. He's pretty much married to these special interests. He's raising a lot of money from them. They're giving him money not because he's so good looking.
He is cute.
I knew you were going to say that. And believe me, if it comes down to looks, Newsom will beat me 4 square. But
I'll even hair too. Sorry.
Yeah, he's got nicer hair. He's got nice teeth. He's got all these things. But I think people are going to look for a real change from the politics of the past. And I think if they give this a chance, you couldn't have designed a worse system that we have with the special interest control. And I think you're right, Katie. I think people will look at this and say, let's give this an opportunity and see what happens.
Well, you've been talking to people since March.
Oh yeah.
I mean, I'd probably obviously before that, but I mean, since you announced your candidacy in March, and so I'm sure that, or maybe kind of let us know what's the feedback you've been getting.
Oh.
It's
It's fantastic. I gotta tell you, when I get a chance to explain what I plan on doing and the neighborhood legislature, I also talk about the fact that there's 19 states around the country now that have businessmen as governors, including Maryland, which has a Republican registration of 10%.
Wow.
Maryland, 10% Republicans, and they have a social and fiscal conservative, Larry Hogan, who is their governor, and guess what? He has a 75% approval rating. So, Californians, it can be done.
Yes.
We can elect a business guy, a small business guy, which is what I am, and which is what Larry Hogan is, and we can get this state back to some semblance of common sense and livability. And I think that's absolutely doable.
John Cox for governor.com.
Yes.
What am I drawing a blank about? So
Neighborhood legislature.
Neighborhood legislature. I should have wrote it down.
Neighborhood legislature. Yes.
And you're gathering signatures there.
Yeah,
do you need to?
We
Or have you got enough
do.
to be on the ballot?
If people want to go and help, go to neighborhoodlegislature.com. This isn't going to happen by itself. I mean, I'm putting a lot of my time and effort and money into this, but I need a lot of help from people, and it's starting to come in. We're getting a lot of people that are getting turned down by the idea that we can change this government and get California back working again.
Awesome.
Yeah,
Thank
very
you for
good.
being here.
Thank
Yeah,
you
thank
for
you.
having me.
Thank you, John.
Mark, who's up next week?
2 women in ag/construction.
I
So-
see you. You're reading.
That's what it says,
My
right?
handwriting's not that bad. Yes, we do. We have women in agriculture and construction representing those sectors.
Right.
Hopefully a very interesting and exciting conversation on kind of changes from the small business perspective, which John can
Yes.
appreciate,
Yes.
for business owners in the agriculture and construction space, which is, of course, especially in California, as John can attest, is a huge part of our economy.
Yeah.
Well, and regulation is so bad in California that most people can't get into business, and a lot of women want to, and that's a real problem.
All right.
Well, as we talked to many entrepreneurs over the last year, it's opportunity is key, and you got to make your opportunity, and we need people to open those doors.
Absolutely.
Thank
Great.
you,
Thank you, John.
everybody. We'll see you next week.
Great, thank you very much.
Thank
I cannot pronounce our guest's last name. It's Robin Schloss.